Dr. Shabir, welcome to Let the Quran Speak.
My pleasure to be on.
I want to talk about celibacy, and I think it's being defined in various different ways, but it comes down to not having sexual relations, and it could be not getting married as well. It seems, Dr. Shabir, that many religions have this aspect within them.
Yes, we see it in Christianity, we see it in Buddhism, in Hinduism to a certain extent.
Why do you think these religions practice celibacy or encourage celibacy?
Well, celibacy is thought to free up a person from one aspect of, let's say, engagement with the flesh, so that we can turn to spiritual things. Mm-hmm. We have more time for God if we have, if we've saved time from involvement in satisfying our physical desires, and satisfying the physical desires themselves. That very act of satisfying the physical desires may be thought to be an indulgence in something which takes one away from the state of spirituality that we expect to have in our union with God.
Mm-hmm. I guess it's sort of like when a Muslim fasts, for example, right? They're kind of forgetting about their physical need and thinking about their relationship to God.
Exactly. So we are practicing, you can say, celibacy for the hours of our fasting
period. Or maybe
period.
asceticism or something like this.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
We are refraining from any sort of sexual fulfillment during that period of time, as we are also refraining from food and drink. Mm-hmm. We also see a certain aspect of this monasticism or in the Muslim practice of resorting to the mosque for the last 10 days of the month of Ramadan, where, for days and nights, that's where a person may live in the mosque, dedicated to devotion. And during that period of time, one wouldn't go home, one wouldn't go to fulfill one's needs of the flesh. Mm-hmm. So there's a certain asceticism there as well. When we perform the Hajj, when the Muslim dons the simple clothing representing that state of consecration that we refer to as ihram, during that period of time as well, it will be a violation of that consecrated state to have sexual relations. So there is a sort of asceticism there. But of course, that only lasts for a short period. If one
so
is
it's
doing,
very temporary then.
Yeah, if one is doing the lesser pilgrimage, it might only last for a couple of hours. And if one is doing the major pilgrimage, then it would be for a couple of days.
So it seems like, in Islam, it's
Mm-hmm.
just very temporary for a short period of time.
That's
but
right.
Then let's say we go to Christianity or Catholicism in particular, we find that it's, a lifetime thing.
Like for some people, this is chosen to be a lifetime
priests,
thing.
yes.
Yeah, for priests, it may be required in some interpretations of church doctrine. And of course, for hundreds of years, this has been the church teaching that the priests have to remain celibate. That is being challenged now in modern times because, for one to be attracted to that way of life, what we find in our modern societies that, only a few people are drawn towards that. And so to make sure that there is an ample supply of priests, the church in some circumstances has had to reduce this requirement. Buddhism had a strict requirement of monasticism for the priests, but in Japan and in China, where the social circumstances and the religions which are already prominent there did not welcome this monasticism or celibacy, we find that there it was a challenge for priests to maintain that, and priests tended to get married until in Japan, within the last couple of 100 years, it was ruled that the priests can actually get married, and some 90% of Buddhist priests did actually get married following that. In China as well, as we said, this was challenged because Taoism there did not find celibacy a welcome practice. But Siddhartha Gautama himself, the Buddha, is said to have practiced renunciation. He left his wife and his son Rahula, and he went into the forest to meditate. And this is taken to be the ideal. You have to detach yourself from the worldly commitments and attachments. In Hinduism, it is thought that you go through certain stages of life, and the last stage of life is the stage of the retired person. Well, by now, one has exhausted one's indulgence in the pleasures of the world, and now one would be retired to maybe the stage of a forest dweller, in which one would be practicing celibacy. This became more prominent in Jainism, an offshoot from Hinduism, as Buddhism is also an offshoot, but in Jainism also we saw the emphasis on celibacy.
Dr. Shabir, why do you think that some religions have celibacy as a requirement or perhaps a recommendation, and then some others don't?
Well, it depends on the development of the traditions in these religions. In Catholicism, in particular, we see that for the first few centuries, the situation of celibacy was a little bit ambiguous. Jesus himself, it is not actually certain whether he was married or not. Some historians think that he was not married. For example, Bart Ehrman, because there's no mention of a wife of Jesus. But Anthony Ladon wrote a book entitled "Wife of Jesus," in which he argues that it was normal for Jewish men to be married, and married very young. Whereas with Jesus, we have 18 missing years in the record. We know about his childhood, and then an incident when he was 12 years old, and then the Gospels pick up the story when he's about 30 years old.
Oh, that's interesting.
So for those 18 years when he was in the prime of his youth and manhood, there's no mention whether he got married or not. Now, of course, there's no mention of a wife later on, but Ladon thinks that it's possible, as was very frequent at that time, that women died in giving birth. So if it's possible, he thinks that Jesus was married, and that his wife died, and that's why we hear nothing of a wife of Jesus later on. But of course, this is speculation; it's not certain. But he has some good arguments to back this theory. Now, as for Paul, who is regarded by some as the second founder of Christianity, his marital status is also ambiguous, because on the one hand he's arguing that he and other preachers should be allowed to take a wife along with them, as Peter and the brothers of Jesus are taking their wives along in their missionary journeys, meaning that this should be sponsored out of the charitable donations. But then, at the same time, when he talks about the situation of being married or unmarried, he says that he wishes that everybody would be as he is, which is unmarried. So, which means that at that time, at least, he was unmarried. But not only that, he is promoting that as a sort of ideal. It is also mentioned that Jesus, on whom be peace, said that blessed is he who, some people are castrated, for the sake of God. So that would seem to indicate that celibacy is a sort of ideal as well. The Desert Fathers in about the 3rd century of Christianity were a group of people who felt so much enthused about the saying of Jesus that you should sell everything you have, give it to the poor, and dedicate yourself to God, that they went into the desert to worship, and they practiced celibacy. In Judaism, I didn't mention so much.
Yeah, we didn't mention Judaism,
so Judaism actually is all for marriage and against celibacy. However, the Essenes, a group of Jews at the time of Jesus, on whom be peace, had resigned themselves to the caves of Qumran, And they were practicing, well, at least the priests among them were practicing celibacy. So in the Islamic tradition, let me just cap this off and add one thing here. In the 57th chapter, in the 27th verse, it says, وَرَهْبَانِيَّتُهُمْ وَابْتَدَعُوهَا مَا كَتَبْنَاهَا عَلَيْهِمْ إِلَّا ابْتِغَاءَ رِضْوَانِ اللَّهِ. So it says that as for the monasticism which they invented, that was not prescribed for them. God did not prescribe it for them. God only prescribed for them to seek the pleasure of God. فَمَا رَعَوْهَا حَقَّ رِعَايَتِهَا. But even then, they did not fulfill the demands of the celibacy. So the Quran is, in answer to your question, why does it develop in some religions and not in some others? Well, there are a number of different factors, but I hope that we have, in this short discussion, tried to get a broader view of this whole situation of the various religions, even though we're not able to answer in detail why it develops one way and not another.
It was just great to see the spectrum of views on celibacy. Thank you, Dr. Shabir.
You're welcome.
If you enjoyed this video, click like and subscribe. And please donate to support our work at QuranSpeaks.com.